name is Frank Farel, and I'm a filmmaker. Some infamous horror movies from the 80s, Street Trash, Spooky. You're listening to The Movie Raid.
It's time for The Movie Raid, and tonight's victim is producer, actor Frank Farel, has done Spooky, Street Trash, amongst others. Hello.
Hello there.
So what we have got planned in the recent upcoming months?
To recap, if anybody actually knows who I am, they know that I'm associated with films of the 80s like Spookies and Street Trash, sort of independent horror films that I'd like to think have risen above a lot of the lesser-known films from that era. Spookies recently came out again. First release was in the 80s on VHS, and there was no U.S. video version until very recently, 2019. Vinegar Syndrome brought out a very packed, full of extras, double Blu-ray set, and the film got sort of reintroduced to a lot of people who may have heard of it or never heard of it, and then there was an enormous contingent of people who were nostalgic. The film had a lot of problems in the making, and I had, I guess, no real career benefit from it until very recently, and the re-release been a hit. It's brought people out of the woodwork. I have fans. I'm a small-time celebrity in some ways, I guess.
Was there ever any concerns, the fact that this has been recent release, was there concerns about maybe they needed the money, or was this legitimately because the audience that was so favored to this film, they were really wanting this to finally be released? Was it because of that?
Well, there was, for years, people were asking how come Spookies has never come out on DVD, and it sort of bypassed DVD. Well, it was a European DVD, other parts of the world, but no release in the U.S. at all until about a year and a half ago. And we made a film, myself and my two partners at the time, that was completed. We ran into a great deal of conflict with our backer, which was, sort of an issue throughout the making. We were sort of being, I wouldn't say harassed, but we were not being given much freedom in terms of how we were allowed to operate. So we had to walk off the project after being just driven to the brink. The stress, abuse became too great. The film was then sort of handed over to someone who saw an opportunity and decided to shoot enough new material to claim a co-directorship. From there, we sort of retreated from the film. We couldn't feel comfortable with it. We were totally distressed about what had happened. It was a low-budget film, but a lot of care and love and talent went into it. The film sort of, let's say, the low point of my life for a good number of years. Miraculously, its reappearance, a new audience familiarizing with themselves, or people who somehow loved it years ago that I never heard about. There are people all over the world that now love Spookies, which is something I did not think I would live to see.
Does this feel, kind of back in perspective view, does this make you want to venture more in the same type of genre films like this, or do you feel like this can be almost a reinvention, or at least a good example to do filmmaking a different direction because of this particular situation with Spookies?
Well, it's interesting you should use the word reinvention, because I am a big film buff. I like all kinds of movies. My introduction, my entry into film was really horror movies, but I became just an overall fan of every film I could see, old, new, foreign. The more bizarre, the more odd and unusual, the better. In terms of what I'm actually doing at the moment now, because of the success of our Blu-ray, in fact, a new edition was just released in the UK. There's a British Blu-ray edition that just came out with some additional extras. From what I've heard, it sold out almost immediately. Hopefully there will be more copies coming. Now it looks like, just like back in the 80s when, our best opportunity we thought to get a film made was to do a horror movie, because they made money reliably. And now, probably the best bet, if I wanted to do a film right now, is to do something related to Spooky. So that's exactly what I'm doing, and I'm in the midst of writing a follow-up movie, which I think will be far different than anything anyone who knows Spookies might be expecting. I want to be able to sort of do the film that we feel, myself and my partners back then felt that we were not permitted to do.
Writing the sequel, do you feel like this might be a little bit fragile in its own way, because after all these years, even though people might expect or might get something more?
Well, it certainly will be satisfying for me. But part of what I really need to be doing, and am doing, I hope, I have two partners, Brendan Faulkner and Thomas Doran, who were the co-directors of Spookies. And Tom passed away a few years ago. We've been continuing to work together over many years. Attempted to mount many other projects that did not unfortunately come to be. Tom had enormous talent, and I really felt we had a great working relationship. He had the kind of creativity I love, where he was just constantly coming up with stuff out of nowhere that was, in my opinion, wonderful. So more than anything, I have to do something that lives up to his standards and, my standards too. I can sort of hear him in my head a lot of the times helping me to try and get through this. The sequel idea is based on an idea that he just sort of came up with and wrote about 8 pages of sort of unconnected material that all these years later had to sort of reconstruct and turn into a more fleshed out story, and I'm incredibly happy with it. I am usually not so happy with something while I'm in the midst of the writing process, but I feel this will go over with fans as well as people who never heard of it. I mean, fans have constantly said, oh, you should crowdfund a sequel to Spookies, and my feeling is that kind of fundraising for films, it's kind of unpredictable as to what your success level will be. They're very well-known people who've had difficulty trying to raise money for a project that way. And since then, I mean, I've been talking to people, and I haven't even really gone out yet formally making any attempt to bring in financing. The word about the film has gotten out. It's got a reputation now. It's been making a profit for people recently, and that kind of thing is what counts when it comes to attracting financing. Just the fact that my name is out there, that the film is out there again. I found that there are lots of doors opening that I'd have to say were throughout most of the rest of my career that were frequently slammed in my face because I wasn't having the right kind of success at the right time in order to get through those doors.
Gaining this kind of success, would you say this is finally becoming almost like your moment so you can succeed to make what you want as opposed to what you really couldn't do before then, or at least what you didn't expect to get into when you did that particular film?
Myself and my late partner Tom, for a number of years we had attempted ourselves to get the rights to the film, to get the rights to Spookies and manage a release on Blu-ray ourselves. Unfortunately, we had a difficult time tracking down who owned the rights. They seem to be a lot of places, at least in records and research we did, seem to have rights, but claimed they didn't. Eventually, we tracked everything back to our backer, who had apparently repurchased the film, and he was unfortunately probably the last person that would speak to us directly or help us with something like this. Fortunately, Vinegar Syndrome, which has become one of the top companies dealing with older movies and specifically exploitation and horror, they really just did a bang-up job with it. I mean, they had confidence in the project. They allowed a documentary to be made called Twisted Tale, The Unmaking of Spookies. Glenn Baisley, Mike Gingold, in terms of DVDs, Blu-rays, putting out interviews, extras, locations, shorts. I mean, just really filling in a lot of the background, which is what many real film fans want more than ever, it seems, these days.
I love it because it's important. Even documentaries, even, for example, Planet of the Apes, Roddy McDowall, he actually documented the process of what he was going through. It was amazing.
He was a real movie fan, and he was collecting movies back when other people did not, and he really cared about the art and the process.
It's important. It's important information to watch what was like doing this process because they can inspire upcoming filmmakers as well as special effects, special makeup effects, and so forth. And it was important to watch this. I mean, yeah, sure, it was fun, but it's also great stuff to look over. It's like, oh, this is the process, and this is what was the business of things, and seeing something. It's something like between this or even watching the Evil Dead. The Evil Dead also had a really rough time to even get the second film out, and they had to make a second film because apparently the first film wasn't as quite expected, especially the history of Sam Raimi.
Well, it's part of the reason that the second film is a partial remake of the first film, is that they were assuming they would hit an audience that hadn't seen the first film.
Absolutely. They didn't even know what it was going to be. They didn't even know what kind of rating or anything was going to be. They didn't even focus on that. They didn't even know what kind of a genre it was going to be, comedy or whatever. And it just ended up being the way it is, and people still love it today. And then, and in terms of like a comparison, probably they still absolutely love the first Evil Dead, obviously. But either way, it still has a good liking, and that's what they want to do.
I'll tell you an interesting story about Evil Dead 2. I saw it when it opened up on 42nd Street, and the audience was incredibly hostile to it because it was not anything that they expected. It was obviously turning. It started out sort of as a horror film, then it turned into a comedy, then it turned into like totally absurd, surreal comedy. They were puzzled. They were hostile.
This kind of reaction, it's amazing of how you see it. And it's amazing when even someone mentions the word sequel, they automatically go, no, that's not going to work. Because oftentimes sequels usually don't pan out as well as the first film, and it's always a gamble. But like in this case, well, it made some kind of an impact, and that's the importance, I guess.
Right, and the thing is, I think nowadays sequels are the expected route to go. It's like it's expected if you have a successful film, well, of course you're doing sequels. Why wouldn't you? But I think the mentality about it has changed drastically too. In terms of, I mean, years ago, if you did a movie and then you did a sequel, it was almost always the rule was it's going to be less well made and it's going to be cheaper and there's not going to be, as much of an audience for it, and that's how the studios generally looked at it. But I think nowadays the attitude is, we'll make a better film the next time if we can.
The audience themselves, they always change. I mentioned this before. They always change in terms of popularity. It was because you either got a younger generation or you got the older generation that wants to stay in the same generation what they're used to and so forth. And it's always rapidly changing in terms of how they want to see their film, especially in the horror genre. They want either lots of blood, lots of gore, lots of nudity, or to a degree of something else. It's brutal. They eat you up, and sometimes you make a big success, and sometimes an accident is the greatest thing you ever did.
Well, yeah, with filmmaking, who knows? I mean, anything can turn out well, and anything that you've meticulously planned can go disastrously.
Yeah, when it comes to with an idea, especially with your sequel idea, and once it gets in motion, once an idea is agreed upon, do you think that it's either necessary or unnecessary to have authority of the idea when you have other people working with you, or do you think it should stay in place of that concept under your?
Are you saying input? Because I mean, things like that work differently because you bring in other creatives and you do want input from all kinds, from the director of photography to your art directors, etc. You want them to help you look at your thing differently. I think in a lot of cases, like on Spookies, where someone who's at the head of the train, so to speak, or whatever, and just what has supreme authority over everything, doesn't always have the clearest sense of judgment. So you don't want that. Just to try and cover all aspects of your question, I also feel that you have to be willing to change your ideas or rethink them or mold them. Frequently, that's done for many reasons, including money problems or problems with your cast or who knows. But I think the real goal, if you can manage it, should be to simply, how can I make this better? How can I do this better? How can I give the audience a better experience? Because in the end, I think the audience is who you're making the film for, and you have to be part of that audience. And so for me, that's like I have to make something that I would be happy with. If I saw it in the theater, I would think, damn, I wish I had made that. I am someone who has spent most of my career failing to get films made. If people ask me, what did you spend most of your time doing? It was chasing money and enduring broken promises and seeing many things fall apart and then just working it up to a level where you've got the confidence back and you start on the next project. Myself and my partner Tom, we were very obsessive. We loved movies. We loved the art form. Films are what inspired us. It would get thoroughly discouraged and just try and figure out what we could do to make ourselves stop being so obsessive. And then, we'd see a movie that was brilliant, and then, we'd fall in love again. This follow-up we're planning for Spookies, this has to make up for every film myself and my partner did not get to make in the years since Spookies.
Go ahead and plug in any websites or anything that you like, promote, or check out right now.
People can find me under my name, Frank Farel, Farel, on Facebook if they want to connect or say hi. I'm very oriented towards fans. I'm enormously appreciative of all the love and respect that I've gotten for a film that I thought was one of the failures in my life. The streaming service Shudder will be premiering Spookies on May 31st, a couple of weeks from now, and it's probably a very easy way to see it if you haven't.
There you have it, everybody. That is actor, producer Frank Farel.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.